All right, we're good. All right, go ahead. If you have your Bible with you, please turn over to Matthew chapter 13. And so this lesson is titled, What Al-Qaeda Taught Me About Evangelism. I know that's a weird title. Some of you probably know what I'm talking about. Maybe some of you don't. So for those of you who don't know, Al-Qaeda is a terrorist organization that was responsible for the attacks on the World Trade Center back on 9/11. And as a response to that, there were two major military operations that have essentially spanned the course, or did span the course, of about 20 years. That was the operation in Afghanistan and the operation in Iraq. And as a Marine, I went to Iraq, and the primary opposition there that we were trying to root out was Al-Qaeda that had infiltrated after the fall of Saddam Hussein's government. There was a power vacuum, and Al-Qaeda sought to take control in that power vacuum. And so we would find ourselves in opposition against them. And so when we got to Fallujah, Iraq in 2006, one of the first things that we did is what they call you RIP with another company, the company that you're replacing. And what RIP is simply you're learning how they operate, how the company before you operated, the tactics that they used, so that you could either adopt them or reject them, or develop your own tactics based on the foundation that they have laid. All right? And so one of the first things that we started doing as convoy security in Iraq is that we would do prison drops. We would take people, enemy combatants who were caught on the field of battle. We'd take them in the back of 7 tons, and we would drop them off on the outskirts of Fallujah so that the Iraqi police would come, they'd get them, they'd take them down into the center of Fallujah to what's called the CMOC, the police station, and they would keep them there until they awaited interrogation and trial. Well, what started to happen is we got a little complacent. We got a little too comfortable, and we thought that the enemy was just dumb. Okay? We thought, well, these guys, they're not warriors, they're not smart, they're not clever. We can just kind of do this and we'll be fine. Well, we started having increased attacks on us, and here's why. Because anytime that you're fighting a battle, anytime that you're fighting a war, you have to keep the enemy on their heels. You cannot give control to the enemy of what we call the pace of battle, right? Whoever controls or dictates the pace of operation, the pace of battle, they're the ones that win. And what started to happen is they started to gain control of the pace of battle because we were complacent. And here's why we were complacent. Because we dropped them off every Wednesday at the same time, at the same place, on the same day. Doesn't take a rocket scientist. I wonder when our buddies who got caught on the battlefield will be dropped off over here at Fallujah. Well, seems like it's Monday at 2 o'clock on the outskirts of the city. How do we get those guys free? Oh, well, we could attack them because they're at the same place, same time, same day. All right? And so what we decided to do is we decided to change tactics to throw them off. So we developed a strategy. We thought, okay, what could we do that the enemy won't see coming? The enemy will not predict it. All right? So instead of dropping them off at the same time, we varied our times. Instead of dropping them off at the same day, we varied our days. And even the times of day. Some days we would drop them off in the middle of the day, some days at night, some days just before the sun came up, some days just before the sun went down. Right? And we varied the different days that we did that. All right? And then we varied the place. Instead of dropping them on the outskirts of the city, we did the Marine thing, and we just drove right into the middle of the city. Which, I got a story about that later. We were in the briefing tent, and we learned this new strategy. And listen, I've only been in the Marine Corps for about 6-7 months. Okay, so I don't know my place yet. Okay, And so the CEO says, this is what we're going to do, yada, yada. We're going to drive right in the middle of the city. And so he said, any questions? And that's kind of like the standard operating procedure of nobody says anything, let's get out of the tent. So I raised my hand, he goes, yes, Lance Corporal Meadows. I said, so the goal of this is to inflict like mortal wounds, right? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, if we drive into the middle of the city, we're probably going to get smoked. And that's when the CEO, a major at the time, politely said, Lance Corporal Meadows, shut your mouth. Okay? And, I was just trying to, joke, but he obviously didn't think that was a joke. So we drove down into the middle of the city, and we had great success doing that. And I think part of the reason for us having everybody in our company come back to see their families is because we were so good at changing our tactics. We were so good at varying our maneuvers, at varying the time, the place, the situations in which we operated. And I'll say this with confidence, from every fiber of my bone. We kept them on their heels because they just didn't know where we were going to be and what we were going to do. And so in a real way, we all understand that whether you know this or not, you need to understand that every day that you wake up, you are in a war. You get that, right? Like every day is a battle. There is nothing arbitrary about your spiritual existence. And there are only two sides of the battle. There's God's side and there's Satan's side. All right? And once again, from Ephesians, we don't fight against people, right? We fight against ideas. We fight against principalities, rulers, authorities of darkness, okay? And so what can happen is if we're not careful, we can be so complacent that we allow the devil and the principalities and the rulers of the darkness to keep us on our heels rather than putting them on their heels, okay? Think about this for a second. And I would say the reason that we find ourselves as the church universal in this situation where churches are closing doors and young people are walking away and people are just not as religious as they used to be is because we haven't really varied our tactics that much. I mean, I don't want to discourage you from door knocking. I hope that if you do door knocking, you do it well. But that tactic in particular is outdated. That will not work with the millennial group, my group, who are now young adults raising families. That will not work with the Gen Z group. What's going to happen is you're going to knock on a door and they either will not answer or they will shut the door in your face. The number one way in which you and I are going to evangelize in the 21st century is through our relationships, is through capitalizing on the relationships that we have, but then also building relationships around us. And that's going to be more than a door knock, okay? And so that's really what Al-Qaeda has taught me about evangelism, that if we're going to win the war, the battle for hearts and minds, we cannot consistently do the same things that we've always done. We can't. It's just, why? Because cultures change. People change. Right? I don't think the reception to the gospel by people has changed. I just think the way in which we deliver the gospel and meet people where they are, so the gospel will change who they are, needs to be updated. And that might be a little cringy for some of us, but that's okay. Notice in Matthew chapter 13, I just want you to look at some of the headings here in Matthew chapter 13. The parable of the sower, the purpose of the parable of the sower explained, the parable of the weeds, explained, the parable of the hidden treasure, the parable of the pearl of great value, the parable of the net. All right. What do you think that section's all about? Anybody want to take a guess? What's that section dealing with? Huh? Okay, evangelism, right? But what is every heading, what word does every heading include? Parable. There we go. All right, so lunch hasn't completely set in yet. All right, good. So every single heading deals with parables. Now here's my question. Why in the world would Jesus tell a story about sowing seed? Because what? Everybody was familiar with doing that. All right? He doesn't tell the parable of what it's like to be a Roman centurion, does he? Because nobody knows what that's like, right? Everybody knows what it's like to be, be under the thumb of a Roman centurion. But notice this: Jesus is talking in parables about sowing seed, right? Parables about the parable of the net, the parable of the pearl of the great value, because these are things people are familiar with. These are things people can relate to. These are things that when Jesus speaks to these people, that it will penetrate who they are, because that's part of their everyday living. And we got to be the same kind of people. We have to be people who are able to connect with other people from where they are in their life, everyday living. Okay? And so how in the world do I do that? Well, it's the word that we've been looking at all weekend. Intentionality. Intentionality. And that might mean that I've got to do some things individually and collectively, church, that's different. It might require, hear what I'm saying, some biblical change. Notice the biblical. What does that mean? And we are scared of that word change. Nobody likes it. Because we automatically say, well, if we change it, you're telling me that all the things that we used to do, they didn't do anything for us. Well, no, that's not true. It's a different tactic to put the enemy on its heels. So, what do I mean by this practically? Okay, so I'm the campus minister at Virginia Tech. All right, and the elders say, hey, we want you as the campus minister to be more focused on outreach to the campus, so that the student body for the campus ministry is not solely made up of students that are transferring from high school to Virginia Tech. We want you to grow the campus ministry by evangelizing the campus. Great idea. All right, okay, how are we going to do that? How are we going to do that? All right, well, we can, if we want to, go around and just knock on doors. And all those doors will shut. Or we can ask the question, what does this campus need that we can provide? So, you're saying, hey, we want to grow the church in Conyers. What does this community need that we can provide? So this is what we did. We rented some space out on the drill field. Virginia Tech's got a huge drill field because they got the Corps cadets. And this is what we did. We sat a table out and we put bags, a dryer ball, and detergent, because it costs like $4.50 to do a load of laundry at Virginia Tech. I mean, how bad of a deal is that? I pay you $60,000 and I got to pay $4.50 for laundry? That's messed up, all right? That's just the way that college works, right? So instead of having these kids having to pay $4.50 for a load of laundry, we say, hey, this is what we'll do. We'll give you detergent for a week, and we'll give you a couple of dryer balls, and in that bag, little Tide Pods, and in that bag, we'll drop a flyer that says College Life in Christ Campus Ministry out of the Blacksburg Church of Christ, and we'll list the dates of things that are going on. And that worked. Or what we'll do is hey, this is what we can do. Why don't we utilize what's called Gobbler Connect? It's the thing where everything that goes on at Virginia Tech's campus, as far as events, where all the students look for events. Hey, this is what we're going to do. We've got a welcome back cookout after church over at the campus house. Let's do it. And we gained 5 students just from that. I'm in a Bible study right now with a student. She came here. She came there. She was disconnected from church, and we're having a conversation right now about the reliability of the New Testament. Okay? What else can we do? What else can we provide for students? Okay, well, this is what we're doing on every the second Friday night of every month. We're streaming The Chosen it's a series about the life of Jesus. We're streaming that in the multi-purpose room at the church for the college students in the college community. The first month we had 5. This past month we had 30. Because we put it out on Gobbler Connect, and we empowered the students. Said, hey, listen, this is not the campus minister's job. This is y'all's job. You guys go and own it. And that's one of the things that we need to do as far as tactics. I said it this morning. It's not the preacher's job to evangelize. Not solely. But when you empower people and people take ownership of a particular project or a particular mission, you will be amazed at what they're willing to accomplish because they own it. You have to empower people to do that. All right? And so, as we've done that, we've seen that people, like to show up and watch a free movie. I mean, anybody here been to the movies lately? I went to the movie Family of 5. Cost me like $70. And I'm like, nah, man, we could just play a movie at the building for free. You know, the 5-finger discount, right? Everybody likes that. And so why am I doing that? And sometimes you get pushback. You say, well, you're just entertaining people. Well, no, there's a method to the madness. I provide them and meet a physical need so that I can then talk about their spiritual need. That's what Jesus did. I mean, think about all the signs that Jesus did in the Gospel of John. I mean, which sign did he do where he didn't also provide a spiritual lesson? Can you think of one? I can't think of one. And so it's not wrong to meet physical needs with a spiritual purpose in mind. And we have to be willing to do that. Listen, the mindset of... Anybody here ever seen the movie Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner, by show of hands? All right, what's the main line from that movie? If you build it, they will come. All right, saying, hey, if you put this field out here, people will be so attracted to the field that they can't help but go and sit down and watch a baseball game. All right, and I'm scared that we've taken that mentality to evangelism. Listen, you guys have probably the most beautiful auditorium I have ever seen in my life. All right? And you've built a great facility. And what I'm saying is you can have the greatest facility ever, but just because you build it doesn't automatically mean people are going to walk through that door from the community. It does not mean that. So as we change our tactics, first thing we want to do is we want to provide a need for the community so that we can then reach the spiritual need. But the second thing we have to do is we have to get away from the building mentality evangelism. That just because I have a building that people are automatically going to walk in. That's not the case anymore. It used to be. It used to be if you tell somebody, hey, we've just constructed a new building. We want you to come and be with us on Sunday morning. People used to flock to that. Now if you say, hey, do you want to come to the church building with me on Sunday morning? People are like, whoa, calm down. All right? I ain't ready for that. So what do we have to do? We have to do community well. What does that mean? That means that you have to be intentional about the time that you spend with your brothers and sisters in Christ outside of Sunday, outside of Wednesday, and invite people to those things. So you got, brother A and brother B, they get together and they say, hey, let's go out to dinner on Friday night and let's just talk life with one another. All right? The question that then needs to be asked is, who are you bringing that's not a Christian to join us? See that? That's somebody at work. That's somebody at school. that's maybe another family member, maybe somebody that's fallen away from the church. You just say, listen, we are just getting together for a meal. We want to have a conversation. We want to talk. And we're just going to share life together. Look in Acts chapter 2 real quick. Notice what it says there. In Acts chapter 2 and verse 42. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and the breaking of bread and prayer. And all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together. They were together. And had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as many had need. And day by day attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes. It wasn't just about going to the temple for the first century church and doing worship right after everybody got baptized. It wasn't like, hey, let's just go over to Solomon's portico and hang out. It was like, hey, let's go there and then let me have you in my home. So this is the question I want to ask you individually and collectively. How well are you doing community with your brothers and sisters? Because you know what people are drawn to who are not Christians? Everybody in the world desires a sense of belonging. Everybody does. Everybody desires a sense of belonging. And so why not take the opportunity during the week, outside of Wednesday, outside of Sunday, to be with your brothers and sisters in Christ? All right. Now I'm going to say something right now that where my army dogs might just body slam me after this. Okay. You need to represent community both outside but also inside. And I know this is going to sound like a super small detail, but it matters to what you communicate to people outside the community. Okay? You ready? Some of you are like, no. Okay. Churches have got to sit together. And you guys aren't the only ones. We have this problem at Blacksburg. I've got my pew and my row and my section in my row. And just outside of the act of God, I'm not moving from it. Because I've had that spot for 30 years. And nobody's moving me from it. All right? So, let me ask you a question real quick. And I'll do a little illustration. What happens if you have 5 people that own this pew, and then you've got another 5 people that own this pew, and then you've got 15 people that own this pew, and then you've got 3 people that own this pew, 2 people that own this pew, and then you got one family, this family of 4 owns this section of the pew, and then you got another family all the way down here that owns this section of the pew. And you've got 50 people that are part of a congregation. What does that communicate to people that walk in, that you invite? What does it communicate? It communicates that you don't like each other. I mean, think about that. You're brothers and sisters in Christ, and these people have been baptized for the remission of sins just like these people down there, but there's 7 feet between them. You've got to sit together. You have to communicate to the outside world that you love each other by something as simple as sitting together. Okay? You've got to do that. Because if you don't do that, you'll communicate to a very sensitive, secular society that these are people who claim Christianity, but they're not together. They're not together. So this is what's going to require for you and I to do, for us at Blacksburg to do, and for you guys here to do. Let go of the pew. It will still be there for Wednesday night, right? It will still be there if you get up. What is more important? You claiming your spot on your pew or communicating to the outside world that this diverse group of people from all different backgrounds and different skin colors loves each other? Do you think the first century church cared about where they sat in somebody's home? They were together. And that's all that matters. That's something simple, that seems simple, that you can do tomorrow, next week. That's my challenge to you. Next week, move from where you are and sit together. And you know what? That might mean that everybody's up front right to right here. Well, guess what? You know what? I'm sure Jeff would probably appreciate that. I'm sure the elders would probably appreciate that. And I'll tell you what, if you have somebody that you invite, I'll almost guarantee you they will say, y'all are pretty close. Yeah. So we have to get out of this mentality of, well, this is my section of the congregation and nobody can touch my pew. And I'll say this too, same thing with the parking lot. Give your guests preference in the parking lot. All right? Those might seem trivial, those might seem small, but they do a big thing in communication. All right? Also, now let's move out of the building, out of the parking lot, everyday life. Okay? One of the things that I can do is when I have time or I go down to the coffee shop or I'm in my workspace, I need to drop breadcrumbs. What do I mean by that? You ever seen the movies where somebody is like captured or whatever and they just drop food on their path and they follow the breadcrumbs and they find the person that's been kidnapped, okay? Well, I need to drop breadcrumbs about who I am as a Christian to other people. And the way that I can do that is simple as having a book. It's having a book. Right? Or having a Bible. Or even a pocket Bible. Now, why do I do that? So earlier I told you about the conversation that I had with a transgendered person. That happened because I was sitting at Starbucks. I was being intentional. I was sitting at Starbucks. I saw a table open up at the front. I sat down, and I had a book called Natural Theology, Blackwell's Companion to Natural Theology. I wasn't even studying natural theology, but I put it on that table. And you know what I put on top of that? C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. And she got that the transgender person got off of their shift. They came over and they said, "Are you in school?" Now, did I walk into Starbucks and say, "I'm a theology student. Come talk to me about God"? No, I didn't say that. But what did I do? I dropped a breadcrumb. I dropped two of them. I dropped a natural theology book and I dropped C.S. Lewis. Everybody in the world probably knows who C.S. Lewis is, whether you agree with him or not. And so you can do that at work. You can do that at the coffee shop. You can do that when people come over to your house. One of the best things that people can do in their house is they can go to like Hobby Lobby, buy a verse, and throw it up on their wall. Right? God's family lives here, something like that. John 3:16, whatever. Throw it up in your house. Why? Because when you start building those relationships to people who you may not know, your neighbor, your coworker, or something like that, guess what? They know when they see John 3:16, they're probably not rocket scientists, but they probably put two and two together and figure out what you believe. And you will be amazed at what kind of conversations start from that. If you go down to the coffee shop, or if you frequent a coffee shop and there's like a coffee bar up there, sit at the bar. I was in Gastonia. One of the people that we got to come to church, I left before I left there before. I basically don't know whether they're a Christian or not. I'm pretty sure they're still going to Gastonia. I've frequented Starbucks every single Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning. So that they would know this guy is going to be there Thursday at 9 o'clock. I knew all of the people there at Starbucks by name, and I always sat on the left side, front and center of the coffee bar. And I'd take out, in this book right here, I'd take it out, The Sun Rises, the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. I put it right next to me, and I'd write a sermon. Hey, are you reading that book? Nope. But why'd you ask about the book? You really, I probably had 5 or 6 conversations with people that asked, "Do you really think that happened?" Yeah, I do. Here's why. What is that? That's a breadcrumb. All right? And even if I say something like, well, what do you think about that? Well, I think it happened. The person says, well, I don't think it happened. What does that give me an opportunity to do? It gives me an opportunity to say, let's have a conversation about it. That's being intentional in my tactics. All right? I don't know if this will get cabbage thrown at me. I got a beautiful fellowship room. Seems like you've got some really cool young people here. What if you empowered your young people to say, hey, on Friday night, every month or every other month, we're going to watch a movie down there. Invite your friends to come utilize the fellowship room so that they can have conversations with young people. All right. So we want to be intentional, right? We want to be intentional about the way in which what we're communicating inside the building and outside the building. But also the other way that we can do this, as far as being intentional, with our young people, our millennials, our Gen Zers, we need to be aware of what they're aware of. So for instance, let's say you're a young person. Anybody here heard of Marvel and their movies? Anybody here? All right, 3 people have heard of Marvel. Okay, cool. So Marvel, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. So one of the biggest movies in the last 10 years is Marvel Endgame and Infinity War. By a show of hands, who has no idea what I'm talking about? Okay. You need to know what I'm talking about. Because young people talk that language. Millennials talk that language. All right? And I don't necessarily know. And here's the thing. Using the tactics from this morning, I may not need to see the movie, but I can ask really good questions. Okay, what is this Endgame thing? Is that like a Parker Brothers game or what's going on here? No, that's a movie. What's the movie about? Oh, well, you've got these heroes, and they're called the Avengers. They're a team, and they're fighting the bad guy Thanos because Thanos wants to kill half of everything that's ever lived in the universe. Now, just from that, I can ask the question, well, what do you think about that? What do you think? Do you think it's okay for somebody to want to kill half of everything that's lived in the universe? That's a breadcrumb. What am I getting to? I'm asking them about where they are morally without saying, where are you morally? Right? So I can ask them about that movie and I say, well, and I've done this with college students. I said, well, why would it be bad? Why is Thanos the bad guy? Why aren't the Avengers the bad guy, right? I mean, wouldn't it be just, beneficial for everybody if like half the universe didn't consume everything that's in the universe? Wouldn't that leave more resources for the people that lived? And you'd be like, what? What's going on right now? What is Dean doing? Jedi mind trick. But no, I want to know. I'm asking them whether or not they're utilitarians without asking them, are you a utilitarian? Utilitarians believe that whatever's the most good for the most amount of people is what's right. All right? And we're talking about Marvel. Right? We're talking about Marvel. You've got a series out now, Loki, recently came out. And one of the characters, the main character, has hinted or implied that they're bisexual. Okay, well, instead of going off and railing against bisexuality with my young person or my millennial or people who have seen the movie or people who are into Marvel, ask the question, well, what do you think about that? What's your thoughts on Loki being bisexual? What do you think the biblical view of that is? So you see that? That's being intentional and tactical. I just want to drop breadcrumbs, and then I want to put rocks in people's shoe. Anybody ever here had a rock in their shoe? No fun. Actually, the other day, I need to switch it up because the other day, I actually had a tack in my shoe. And that did not feel good. I didn't have to go get a tetanus shot. But then I want to put rocks in people's shoes. So when I have this conversation about the social media that my young people are in, or my millennials are in, or my people are aware of, right? I ask the question, okay, so as you look at this particular thing in this particular movie, or did you see that story on on Twitter, right, or in the news. What do you make of that from a biblical worldview? What's your thoughts on that? All right. I'm in a conversation right now at Blacksburg with a lady who does not believe, young person, who is not sure that the Bible teaches that homosexuality is a sin. Thank you for not going, oh gosh, oh no. So, two approaches. I can be like, well, it's a sin, duh, it's right there, it's plain and simple. Or I can be tactical, and I can say, I switch up my tactics because they've heard before, that's a sin, that's wrong, going to hell. All right? And all that might be true, right? But what I need to do is say, okay, so why do you believe that? What's the holdup? And are you willing to accept what the Bible says about this? Notice, it's not, do you agree with my opinion? I mean, how many times does Jesus say in a sermon or talking to people, hey, you better agree with my opinion? Where does he say that? Does Jesus ever get what he believes across to people? Absolutely. Does he ever say, well, you got to agree with my opinion? No, he doesn't do that. He asks questions and he gives thought-provoking statements is what he does. And if we do those things, if we identify what we can provide the community physically and then seek to meet a spiritual need, we're winning the battle. We're winning the battle. If we can go ahead and switch up some of the things that we do and the way that we behave in church, by what I mean by that is move from your pew. Give visitors, if you know visitors are coming, just go ahead and say, hey, we got visitors coming. We need to give them preference in parking. Let me ask you this. How many of you, by a show of hands, would give up your pew or your parking spot if it meant people being baptized into the Lord Jesus Christ? How many people? So do it. Okay? So do it. And that falls, and the implementation of those types of things falls to the elders. And then when the elders decide that they're going to do that, or if the elders decide that they're going to do those types of things, it's on the flock to follow. It's on the flock to follow. Unless you can identify book, chapter, and verse where it says, this is wrong, then follow. I love the fact, and I'll just brag on y'all a little bit. I absolutely, positively love the fact that you have worship at 9:30 in the morning and Bible class after that. I love the fact that the Lord's Supper is not the first thing out the gate. And that shows that you guys are tactical. And it shows that you guys are intentional. And keep doing that. All right? Let me speak to some of the younger people in the younger families here that'll be on the recording later or here this afternoon. How am I going to say this without coming across like being a jerk? Okay, I'll just say it. If you recognize that the elders are seeking to be intentional about evangelism, it's time to go. It's time to roll up the sleeves and get to work. It's time to if you're not plugged in here, it's time to get plugged in. I'm going to need you here, okay? If you have used COVID as an excuse to stay away from worship, to stay away from people, those days should be gone. Those days should be gone. I'm not saying that you need to be reckless with your health, okay? But I'm saying what we need to get back to as the Church Universal is community. If you provide the community something that they need for a spiritual need, and then they see community being done well here, it won't be the case of, well, I'm scared to talk to somebody. People will ask you, how'd you get that? What's going on here? There will be people that will visit from other places, other denominations, and they will say, they do community better where I am. Oh, they do community here better than where I attend. I'm coming back here. because they do community well. And then if we just drop breadcrumbs, this is what I want to challenge you to do this week. I want you to find a book that you might have. Maybe you can ask the elders to borrow one from the library. Maybe you might go on Amazon and buy one. Buy a book, grab a Bible. In your area of work, wherever it is, or in your house, place that book somewhere. And people will ask you about it. Might take some time, but people will ask you about it. Take The Sun Rises, and if you've got an island or a kitchen table, just set it there the next time you invite people who are not members of the church to your house. And they'll ask you about it. Take a tract about the Church of Christ, put it on your table. Put it at your desk, in your office. Go to the coffee shop. Frequent it. Daily. Wherever you go to eat regularly. Take something with you that says or shows that you're a Christian. And people will ask you questions. And hey, if you get to a point where you have a conversation and you don't know, it is okay to say, hey, elders, hey, deacons, hey, well-respected Bible student in the congregation, I'm struggling with this question. Is there any way that you can help me with that? And I will almost promise you, actually, I'll promise you, there'll be people there to help step in and fill in that void. So, what did Qaeda teach me about evangelism? Qaeda taught me that you can't do the same thing over and over. You remember Einstein's definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, for about 3 months in Iraq, we could have incurred a massive loss of life. I'm not joking. A massive loss of life had we stayed with the same tactics. I might not even be standing here if we just kept doing that route. Every Wednesday, 2 o'clock, outskirts of Fallujah. But when we change tactics and we are intentional about the way in which we do evangelism, and we drop breadcrumbs and we serve the community and we do community well, the appetite for people to be a part of that is just amazing. That's one of the reasons why we're at Blacksburg, because they do community well. Last thing I'll say, and then the lesson's yours, and I got to hit the road. One of the things that you need to do, or that you should do if you're not doing it, individually and collectively, is you don't need to rush out of the doors after Sunday worship or Wednesday night service. You need to stay. You need to be around people. Well, bedtime's 8 o'clock. We'll make it 9. Okay? One of the things I love about Blacksburg, one of the things that you see in churches that are successful in evangelism and successful at church growth is they are so enamored with one another that they stay around to talk to one another. At a previous congregation I was at, the lesson was over and everybody was out of the building in 10 minutes. What does that say to visitors? Well, they don't like being around each other. They listen to the preacher and they're gone. They might not even like the preacher. They're gone. One of the first things that we saw when we were here, we came to Blacksburg. We went to Blacksburg. We visited. The sermon was over at about 11:45. And we left at 2 o'clock. And people were still talking. There were people in the back of the multipurpose room. It wasn't a scheduled event. They just sat down and had lunch together. And that's when I looked at my wife and said, we got to be here. All right? So, I don't know where you are. And here's my invitation. My invitation is not, part of my invitation is obviously if you need to be a Christian and you want to be baptized, you should do that. Here's my invitation. And it's in the form of a challenge. Don't just be here this weekend to say you went to an event. Don't just be here this weekend so you can say, man, we really got something off the calendar in the first part of 2022. I hope this weekend, if anything can be accomplished this weekend. This is, I was born at night, but not last night, right? I understand that this is probably the core group. I hope your hearts are stirred for lost people. I hope that some of these things that we've talked about, you will implement intentionally into your life. And I hope that the leaders of this congregation and the influencers in this congregation will take what we've learned and they will implement it collectively. Anybody here want to be around when they finally sign the note that says, hey, they had to sell the building? But what if we change that narrative about church? What if we look back on our deathbed and we say, you know what? We were the generation that when all the stats said the church is dying, the church has no hope, the church has no future in Conyers, Georgia, we were the ones that stepped up, we rolled up our sleeves, we put our hands to the plow, and we did evangelism tactically and intentionally, and we changed the lives of a community. And now I've run the good race. I've run a good race. It's time for me to go. That can be the story that we write. Go ahead and turn real quick to Acts chapter 29. Everybody at Acts chapter 29? Exactly. There is no Acts 29. Because you're Acts 29. The story of the church is being written right now with your life. So the question at hand as we offer the invitation is, what story will be recorded when it's time for us to go and meet the Lord? And with that, I'll offer the invitation for anybody that needs it as we sing.
Careless soul.